of what are we dealing with. Because one of the greatest paradoxes of what goes on in Israel and Palestine is that on the one hand, it's not a complicated story. We've been there before. European settlers coming, either genociding or kicking out the indigenous people. The Zionists have not invented anything new in this. And on the other hand, Israel succeeded, with the help of its allies everywhere, including in this country, to build this complex explanation that is so complex that only they can understand. And you are not allowed to interfere, especially if you are Germans. You are not allowed to interfere in this analysis because it's very complex. No, it's not. It is really not complex. And this is why history is so important. Understanding the not so complex history of what the Zionist movement was and is doing to the indigenous native people of Palestine is what the story is all about. Yes, there are other stories connected to it, I agree. The fate of the Jews in Europe, the Holocaust, the relationship between Christianity and Judaism over the last 2,000 years. But these are sidebars. These are not the main story. They belong to the story, but you don't begin this. This is why in Israel, even unfortunately Palestinian students who are Israeli citizens, when they learn about the history of their own country, they begin in Odessa. I remember my Palestinian students in the university saying, can you explain to us why we who were born in Marar or Sakhnin or in the Nakab have to begin our history in Odessa? They didn't even know where Odessa was. And I said, that's because you are under occupation, even inside Israel. Not just in the West Bank, not just in the Gaza Strip. Palestinians inside Israel are also under occupation and are also under colonization. And if we don't understand this, we will not break the deadlock. Because what is called the peace process that began in 1967 is taking place on Mars, on the moon. This is the only peace process in history that I know of that had no relevance whatsoever with the problem it was supposed to solve. What they were talking about in Geneva in 1977, in Madrid in 1991, in Oslo in 1993, had very little to do with the essence of the problem. It dealt with the symptoms, I agree. It dealt with the symptoms, but not with the essence. And this is the second greatest Israeli success. That not only the public opinion does not deal with the essence, but also the peace process very successfully succeeds in avoiding it. So if you go back to history, and you are using today the right language, you are not anachronistic, as someone was trying to say this morning. You are not anachronistic. You are actually a very relevant, updated person. I'll explain what I mean. If you say that Zionism is colonialism, you are the youngest and most updated student of history I've met. Anyone who will try to deter you by saying this is anachronism, this is not helpful, this is anti-Semitism, is anachronistic and lives on the moon or in Mars and can continue to talk about something which has nothing to do with what's going on the ground. Actually, if you know Hebrew, you know that the whole Hebrew language from 1882 until today, which was constructed to describe what the Zionist movement is doing in Palestine, uses again and again the word hityashvut. hitnachalut. And the only way of translating these words is to colonize. There's no other translation. So the Zionist movement in the late 19th century, when colonialism had a very good public relations, was very gladly using the word to colonize. But then they learned that colonialism was not so popular. So they translated it differently. They found the word settlement, which means something else in English. And they found the word, they said, yes, it's colonized, but it's not like colonized. It's a different kind. Again, it's complex. And only we, the Israeli Jews, understand why Israeli colonization and white colonization in Africa is not the same. So if you're not an Israeli Jew, you don't understand it. If you're not a Zionist Israeli Jew, of course you cannot understand it. And I think this is important to bring back in our teaching in schools, in our approach to the public, in our negotiations with the political elite in this country,